Everybody's been talking about rapid change. I don't care where you are on the planet, I don't care what the profession is, everybody's talking about rapid change. I'm going to talk about it too, but I want to give you a couple extra parts of it. Most people are talking about it a bit like this. You feel the change around your ankles, right? But then you're not looking at the big wave coming up and, right? That's a legitimate view, but there's more to it. Yes, as artificial intelligence can autonomously write and rewrite its own code based upon feedback systems worldwide, that's going to make a big amount of change faster than Moore's Law. Everybody knows what Moore's Law is, right? And we see how that made all this change in the last 10 to 25 years because a lot of things were connected to computers, from mining to medical systems to university systems, right? So as the computers accelerated capacity, lowered cost, all that changed. Well, that's just one of the big deals coming up. But first, I want to stay on artificial intelligence for just a little bit. And that is that we have a lousy conversation. We're confusing three different kinds of artificial intelligence as if it's the same thing. It's not. And the differences are really, really important. What we have today is artificial narrow intelligence. All right? Everybody knows about the chess champion, and they know about the Jeopardy champion, they know about the AlphaGo in China and Korea. Well, if you took that AlphaGo program and you changed the rules of Go, instead of 19 by 19 grid, you make it 20 by 20, AlphaGo will not win. You, the human, though, can, because you can adapt. A narrow intelligence only adapts within its focus. It can't go outside of it. So there's going to be a proliferation of artificial narrow intelligences all around the world in all kinds of things. You take the whole mining process from the very beginning all the way out to product, every single part of it can have its own narrow intelligence. Right? And then even connecting that into a collective intelligence is still narrow intelligence. The next step is artificial general intelligence. We may never get there. It's not a guarantee. Artificial general intelligence is a lot tougher than it looks. Artificial general intelligence is a little bit like you. You can adapt with new information. General intelligence can adapt, design its own situation, take a look at sensor networks worldwide, cloud computing, and by the time artificial general comes in, if it does, by maybe 2030 or so, we might have quantum computing. Now, everybody had heard about quantum computing, right? And of course, none of us understand it. But we understand that it's really a big deal. I mean, maybe there's many parallel universes, and maybe the computers of every single one can computate all this at the same time in one moment. In any case, it's fast. It's really fast. So if you take artificial general intelligence, scouting out the whole Earth, figuring out how to rewrite its own code to solve the problem, whatever you give it, no matter what it is, and it's connected to quantum computing, that's a lot different than narrow intelligence. All right? Now, superintelligence is general intelligence that sets its own goals, independent of you. That's what science fiction is worried about. So I do a lot of stuff in Korea, South Korea from time to time, and the South Koreans were going nuts. They said, oh my God, the Go champion was defeated by artificial intelligence. The Terminator is here. No, the Terminator is superintelligence. That's way over here. We may never get there, but we have to be responsible and think that we probably will. And we have to plan accordingly for that. If we don't, we've got some very serious problems coming up. Okay, we took a look at a lot of the future AI stuff and job studies. Not one of them mentioned synthetic biology. Synthetic biology could very well be a bigger deal than the steam engine. Synthetic biology is not the same thing as CRISPR-9 and genetic engineering. You take the DNA of a rose, you knock something out, you put something else in, the rose glows at nighttime, but it's still a rose. Synthetic biology is not that. Synthetic biology is where you sit in front of a computer and say, I want something that can sniff out copper traces, or I want something that can do this and do that. So you have these massive databases that you pull together and make your own unique DNA that's never existed on the planet before. You put it in a nourishing environment, you reproduce it, and you have a species that's never been there before. That's synthetic biology. Think about everything that nature can do that you can't do, and then imagine figuring it out. That gives an extraordinary capability to humanity. We're just now beginning at that. So you take that, plus general intelligence, plus quantum computing, and you integrate them together, and that's a big wave coming up, not just AI. Okay. New technologies is a term, just like we use the word ICT. ICT covers a lot of different software, hardware all together, because you can't keep listing all these things that just bore people to death. So when I say NT, I'm meaning not only artificial intelligence, not only robotics, but also synthetic biology, genomics, computational science. Computational science speeds up science because you do it in a simulation rather than a laboratory. And you can ask people around the world to collaborate with you unused software time, so you can make a supercomputer at no cost. That's a big deal. Cloud computing, data analytics, artificial augmented reality, nanotechnology, two kinds. Right now we have big machines making little things. We don't yet have little things making big things. The guy that invented the term nanotechnology, Eric Drexler over at Oxford now, is working on trying to do the first part. A leaf is a little thing making big things. A leaf is nature's way of molecular manufacturing food. Right? We don't know how to do that yet, but we'll learn. Everybody and everything, semantic web, tele-everything, quantum computing coming up, telepresence, holographic communications, intelligence augmentation, collective intelligence, blockchain, 3D, 4D printing, drones, driverless cars, other autonomous vehicles, conscious technology, and the synergies among all these. That's why it's in red. It's the synergies that's a big deal. Because right now, we tend to think of all these technologies as if they're separate things. You got a room full of AI, you got a room full of synthetic biology, you got another room full of nanotech. The fact of the matter is, we're integrating all these things. How many different technologies are in your hand right now? More than you can use. Like the speaker earlier said, he had the technology in his family but didn't even know how to use it yet. You've got more stuff in your phone right now that you don't even know you've got. Okay, so that may be turned into this little contact lens. So eventually, you don't have the little cell phone. You're walking down the street negotiating smart contracts with your AI avatar. So think in terms of a Rubik's Cube. Imagine all the different technologies of mining and all the technologies that might be related to it. And imagine mixing and matching to figure out what's possible. Or think about lashing them together like we do with a cell phone, is this approach. Another thing I would recommend you do tonight when you get a chance, list all the innovations you think are going to be really important for the next 5 years or 10 years of mining. List them down one side, repeat them again across the top, and then you fill in the boxes by saying, in this one, if nanotechnology continues as we think, how will that change synthetic biology? That's a whopper question, by the way. You can do the same thing with any combination like that. It's just a way of organizing a lot of different things that don't normally get put together and helps you ask the right questions. As I mentioned, synthetic biology is going to speed up science, because science, the old way, when we were in school, right, you was taught to observe, create a hypothesis, design an experiment, control for variable, run the research, get the stuff together, publish it, and wait 6 months or a year. And then somebody else is supposed to duplicate it another 6 months to a year, right? That's real slow. Even though that's real slow, look at how much progress in the last 25 years. It's extraordinary. That is going to look slow compared to the next 10 to 25 years. Because increasingly, scientists are getting the idea you can do a heck of a lot more science in a heck of a shorter time with this sort of an approach. So if you take computational science, along with Moore's law, you add in here artificial intelligence, moving toward artificial general intelligence, you add in as well computational science, and then you add in as well the synergies among these next technologies. And these four things together is going to make much more change than just AI by itself. Okay, what happens? Well, this is also leading to the concentration of wealth. Anybody got a good answer other than a revolution? You know, history's pretty clear. We all know what happens. You know, per less buck. When the rich get too rich and the poor get too poor, they don't go to McDonald's anymore. Income gaps are widening. Employmentless economic growth seems to be the new norm. Return on investment in capital and technology is usually better than labor. Future technologies can replace much of human labor. Long-term structural unemployment is a business as usual surprise-free forecast. We have to take that seriously. Back when the Industrial Revolution began, had we had some conferences like this, we might have figured out how to develop the industrial age without as much pollution. We now have conferences like this, so we should think ahead and figure out how to avoid these things. Okay, so what do we do about this? One of the things we did is we read all the research, found out what, all is a big word. We read a lot of research, and we made a list of what questions were not asked that should be, like synthetic biology, like the synergies among next technologies and so forth. And what questions were answered badly? What should education do? All the studies I found only had one answer. Give STEM education. Okay? That's a good idea, but what percent of the world is going to be able to make a living in STEM education when we go to quantum computing with artificial general intelligence? Right? Okay. So we created 3 alternative scenarios. You can get these at the end. There's a list of websites you can click on to get these things. But basically, the first one says we got good decisions and we got stupid decisions, like today. Right? And you run that out to 2050. Why 2050? Because you can't talk about cultural and economic change in 5 years. It's just not enough. You go out to 2050, you can start talking about it. Because we're going to have to talk about culture and economic change. I don't see how we get from here to there without that. And peaceful. The second one is a nightmare. You know, if you got a friend that's just too happy and you want to, get him a little depressed, Xerox that thing and just stick it under his door. On the other hand, if that's too depressing, you read number 3. Number 3 is really quite nice. These things have been peer-reviewed and internationally, gone through, and they're detailed. Each one is 10 pages. These are not simple scenarios. These are not a discussion of assumptions in a couple of paragraphs, like a lot of things that you see. These are detailed, if, then, how, who, when, why, how did that happen, how did it connect? A lot of information in this thing. The idea, if humans were free, is the idea, remember Maslow? You said, you have your basic needs, da-da-da-da. Well, if for an individual, why not for a civilization? Right? We are in the process of making the world work. Yes, there's problems, but we're winning more than we're losing. We are being look at the poverty reduction rates, faster than all the forecasts. How much new potable water has been made to the world? Faster than people expected. We are learning how to make the basic needs of the world work, even with all the population growth. Yes, there's a lot of problems. I know, I work on them. But basically, we're making the world work. The love and belonging and its needs are being taken care of by social media to a large degree. So what's next? Eventually, you have self-actualization. Well, what happens when you have a civilization beginning to self-actualize? As a child grows up, you're telling them what to do as a parent, but when they become a teenager, it's hard to tell them what to do, right? And when they're an adult, you're not telling them anymore. Well, we are maturing towards a self-actualizing economy, which means that you can make a living out of being yourself. Because it's going to be very hard for you to make a living out of copying a whole lot of other people. because those things are being automated as we go. Anyway, this explains how all that works. Now, we've done some workshops around the world on these things. We give the scenarios so people read them before they go into the workshop. And as you can see, there's about 18 countries have done something. They've come up with 100 ideas. STEM education is one of the 100 ideas. So there's reason to be optimistic, but there's no reason to go to sleep either. None of this stuff is guaranteed. Okay, so how do we keep track and anticipate all this stuff? I mean, it's a really complex future coming up. One of the things I've been asked by the World Future Society to do is to create what we call a legacy committee. Some people call it the old farts group. But anyway, the idea is you take the old guys and say, what's important for the new guys to understand and new ladies to understand? And one of the ones I put in is whatever you look at, doesn't matter whether it's the future of mining or the future of eyeglasses, whatever you look at, in my judgment, as a rule of thumb, it'll become more complex than you think is possible. Take the future of the calendar, becomes a cell phone. Take the future cell phone, becomes a camera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything gets more complex. So we're going to have to be smarter and manage information in a new way. Relational databases can't quite do it. It's the best we got so far. It's really good stuff. We applaud it, nothing wrong, but we've got to move on. And I think we move on to what we call collective intelligence. Now, by collective intelligence, I mean something very specific. I do not mean simply averaging everybody's judgment in this room. What I'm talking about is imagine all these brains connected to a common platform and able to respond in an organized way to other people's thoughts, so that averaging it together is a slice in time. But we know that we increase intelligence by responding to feedback. So if there's no feedback mechanisms here and no responding to feedback, we don't get smarter. So we can create a collective intelligence system so that every element within it can be commented and changed by every other element within the overall system, like your brain. New information comes in, new associations occur. All right? So collective intelligence is like the mind. It emerges from the system. The system, there's people, software, and information. All right? That's the system. But the collective intelligence is a constant emerging process. The more you use it, the smarter it gets, just like your brain. So, in creating one of the first things that you do, whether it's the industry as a whole or your own company in specific, what are your key challenges? What are they? Be real specific about that. Then, who knows the most about each of those, and how do you get access to them? For each challenge, what are the best news sources, computer models, and et cetera, that can come up with scanning items? Think of the news coming in like the short-term memory of the brain, and then think of the scanning where you've made a decision for something, where you get involved and say, that's important. Or a human intervention at that point. That's like the long-term part of the brain. So you're slowly building the brain through time. Then you create situation charts, like if you say you know the situation, well, what is it for you to really be sure that you know? Like if you know the situation on climate change, what is it that you have to know? You got new laws? Do you got a new temperature? To say that you know it, what do you have to know? And then the weak point in civilization, to a large degree, is what ought to be the situation. We're far better at describing the situation than saying what ought to be. Then the third is, what do you do about the gap between what is and what ought? What are the policies? All of this in a situation chart should be able to be changed all the time, just like your brain changes all the time with new information. So in a system, this is like a general idea, you should know the short-term memories, what are all the sources on the planet that you can get access to for your system. Automate that, AI if you want. Then you got to have some human intervention. What is really important? And then you can make judgments about it, because a piece of information can change its meaning through time. You can't do that in a relational database. Relational database, you just add more units, and you hope that your search has a better result. But information itself is different. You saw in that photograph, sometime you have light coming in from here, you get a shadow. Light going here, you get a different shadow. What's the truth? Aha, it's all three of these things are the truth. So you want to have a piece of information with your comment on it, your comment on it, your comment on it, so the piece of information gets smarter, so to speak, through time. All right, then you can create your situation charts, and then your reports and your actions. We're going to have, this is one we do ourselves for the future of the world, so to speak, very grandiose. But it's got 3 sections. You got your challenges, your research, and the methods. You can create your own the same way, but you can just use this as a guide. Here is an example of a report section where it says free on there. Anybody can go to this right now. Go to THEMP, the Millennium Project, THEMP.org. Anywhere you see free, you click on and you can get a lot of stuff. It's a fair amount that's free in there. The rest is subscription. Now, you see each one has a whole bunch of options. So it's not just a data entry. The data entry also has situation, report, digest, edits, scanning, news, comments, models, resources, books, papers, questions, and data. All right? That's overwhelming if you had to go through it like with Google, because Google gives you everything in the world, which is wonderful. I think they're one of the greatest corporations in the history of civilization. I'm even one of their Google fans and all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't give you coherence. What we need is how do you make sense of all this change? How do we get coherence to make intelligent decision? Information overload. Anybody not suffering from information overload here? The only person not suffering from information overload is living in a cave somewhere in Montana, probably. Okay, so we need a coherent system. So you can create your own menu for what you're doing, but something like this, so that all the people in the company or in the industry all have access through some procedures so that you're slowly building the collective intelligence. You're getting the best out of your brains here and feeding back again so that your initial input 2 days later or 5 days later may have changed because you now have more intelligence about even a particular piece of information. Here's another chart example. We also build in here decision support software. So for example, let's say that you see in the scanning some new patent on a process, and you go, oh my God, that's going to change what I was going to do next week. I better check this out. But I'm not sure. I just don't know. So you can send out an invitation to people in your company or your industry, if you do it as an industry, and say, okay, here are 5 questions I want to answer about this patent. So you have a way to collect people's judgments in a unique way. When you do a questionnaire, you can't see what the person next to you said. All right? But the person next to you might say something, might change your judgment. They might come up with something that you didn't know about. So in this system, when you enter an answer, a rating, down here, once you submit it, it gives your content. It says, explain it if you want to. So you give a number and you say, well, I said 5 because of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But then I can also read what everybody else who said it, with all the 5s together, all the 4s together, and so forth. So you get a collective intelligence in real time. And as a result, you may go back to your section and edit yours because you didn't know that this other patent had superseded this one. You're looking sort of stupid if you left that comment there. In blogs, you can't go back, and edit your stuff so easily. This you can edit anytime, so you can vote often and you can vote early on this system here. Okay. 1, it helps you keep track and anticipate change. So when somebody says, you can't predict the future, okay, fair enough. A flying saucer could land on top of the hotel and it would change all of our forecasts right now. True, true. But you can be more certain than less certain if you use systems like this. And you want to increase your certainty as much as possible. You don't know the truth of the future, but you can increase certainty, certainly. And it helps you keep track of all this sort of stuff. It can unite functions such as foresight, strategy, investments, R&D, and operations into one system. How is the brains of your company, how do you tap them all the time? You got all kinds of people with smart stuff. And they may be shy. And some people may talk too long. But you have the common denominator, this little common platform so that you can learn from it. Provide a communications platform for a whole of industry or whole the company responds to a future challenge very quickly. Identify industrial ecology, for example, and other sort of opportunities on an ongoing basis. So as soon as one person learns something, everybody else can learn it together. Invite experts and creative people to participate in building the brain of the future of Peru's mining industry so that the whole industry gets smarter together. We put this stuff in a book. Here's a bunch of web links where you can get some of the stuff. And I wish you all a very happy future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Glenn. I'm sure we are going to have some questions for you. We are going to have some questions for you right now, so please put your heads. Por favor, si alguien tiene preguntas, es un excelente momento, si pueden levantar la mano. Al fondo, disculpa que la luz no me deja ver, por allá y acá también tenemos una pregunta. ¿Alguien más para ir alcanzándole de repente el micrófono? En esta fila, al fondo. Perfecto, 3. Muy bien. ¿Aló? ¿Aló? ¿Pueden ponerse de pie para hacer la pregunta? Porque no se les ve. Gracias.
¿Aló? ¿Aló? La pregunta va a ser en español. Mi nombre es Carlos Medina, de RPM Global. La verdad que toda la visión desde el punto de vista tecnológico, hacia dónde van, claramente es un conjunto de información. Como tú planteas, lo que es esa inteligencia artificial general va a involucrar un cambio tecnológico profundo dentro de lo que es la sociedad. La pregunta que tengo yo es cómo los jóvenes, estamos hablando del 2050, cómo se están adaptando o cómo van a llegar a esa situación. Porque en este momento tú cuando ves a los jóvenes tienen 5 o 3 o 4 canales de información y son capaces de interactuar y compartir y analizar y trabajar sobre eso. ¿Cómo tú vas insertando eso desde el punto de vista en lo que es la parte de colegio, universidad, industria? ¿Cómo lo insertas dentro de ese proceso?
Right. A lot of ways. There's not a single answer. One, the Ministry of Education should declare increasing intelligence as an objective of education. It's sort of an obvious idea, but what country has that as an objective? We have give you knowledge, make you a nice citizen, and go off and get a job, right? Well, we know a lot about brain functioning today that we did not know 10 years ago. We now know if you're born with a certain IQ, that IQ can be increased. We know you can increase intelligence. There's a lot of ways you can do it. How many teachers have you ever met that could answer the following question? What advances in cognitive science do you apply in your teaching methods? Bingo, we don't know. Teacher training schools don't teach you that. But if the Ministry of Education said increase intelligence as an objective of education, then teacher training schools will have to get cognitive sciences and brain physics, all this sort of stuff, into informing teacher education. How do you teach increasing intelligence? That's one. Two, old piece of wisdom from Socrates, know thyself. You didn't have to know yourself in the agricultural age, maybe a little more in the industrial age, maybe a little more in the information age, but if you are actually having an avatar, an AI avatar, who goes running around the world all night long while you're snoring away, and then wakes you up in the morning and says, guess what? I have found 75,000 things you want to do today. And I've negotiated smart contracts with 15 of these things that'll actually earn you some money if you agree to. And there's 15 over here that are just cool to do. That is not an impossible future for these children. But they have to know something about themselves. Know thyself. What turns you on? Every entrepreneur hotshot, whether it's, Elon Musk, they always answer the same, follow your passion. Okay, how often are people taught in their early elementary school is know yourself? What about doing an analysis, me according to me? Right now we have everybody in the same time, moving the same way, learning the same thing, and then they get pushed on to the next grade as if we're a factory. That's okay for factory management. Makes sense, but not for the self-actualization economy. We're just going to have to learn how to connect our passions, our curiosity, our hobbies to markets worldwide. Let's say I like to scratch my nose on the right side. And for some reason, I can take some finger paint and make some sort of weird art thing. There might only be 0.0000001% of the world that's interested in finger painting with a nostril or something, right? Well, that's all you need to, pay for your lunch. Right? Let's say that you're going to go to the Gold Museum. Right? And you say, okay, you've sent out a little note, and you say, I'm going to go to the Gold Museum. Anybody want to go with me? Visually, electronically. And okay, let's say 100 people come in, and you charge them maybe €1. 100 euro for walking around a museum I was going to do anyway? That's a pretty good lunch I can buy. You get the idea. In the old days, the market was the middle, you revolved around it. You literally had to walk to the market. Now, all of us are the center of half of civilization right now. Over 51% of the world have access to internet. Over 51% of the world has access to internet right now. Now, out of that, billions of people, how many have to be interested in what you're interested to pay a euro or two? Not that many. We're not teaching in schools, how do I connect to the world? That's what the information revolution, by the way, originally meant. You had a center point here, we revolved around it. Now the orbit becomes a center point, but we're all the center point. We're all the center of half the world market. But we haven't been taught to connect up to it. We're getting a little bit of that in the social media. It goes back to your point. Yeah, people are beginning to learn how to do, little children beginning to play. That's good. And as we continue to go up, one of the things I would tell people now, like in 5th grade or high school, say, what are your hobbies? What's cool? How do you connect with those people worldwide? They say, oh, well, I know I can do what's that. Good. That's the idea. Start to develop your global networks. Think of yourself as a holding company. Maybe you're a juggling teacher. Maybe you're also a history buff going through the museums with your little glass thing. Think of yourself as a holding company. How many different skills and interests do you have? You're not just one thing. You're a complex being. Then how do I connect my little holding companies, or 20 or 30 little holding companies, to markets worldwide on an ongoing basis? What can the market bear? Maybe they can only pay €0.50. Okay, so you expand your market a little bit. All right, I don't want to run on too long, but there's 100 suggestions overall to address some of this stuff. The suggestions are organized in terms of education. There's about 20 or so in there. There's also organized in terms of business and labor. It's also organized in terms of government. It's also organized in terms of science and technology. And it's also organized in terms of culture. The idea of the job culture is not likely to be a majority of the future. You'll still have it. We figure by 2050, you've got a workforce of 6 billion people. By the turn of the century before, it was around 3 billion. So we figure about 6 billion, roughly, in 2050. Out of that, we think you'll still need 1 billion people having conventional jobs. They go to the job, they get paid, the whole 9 yards, right? So that's not going away. But we figure you don't need that many more to make civilization work. You hear the economists say, well, we don't need that many people. You don't need that many people to make civilization work. How many people do you need to make civilization worthwhile? That's a different question, and that's what the self-actualization. Because imagine, on top of this, those little contact lens I showed you there, the experimental stuff, that's going to get better and better, to the point that if you took an IQ test, why wouldn't you get every answer right? Because it's reading, recognition, the whole business, so it's giving you the answers immediately. So why wouldn't you score 100% on an IQ test? So that means behaviorally, it's possible that the majority of the world, at some point, are behavioral geniuses, not necessarily biological geniuses, but we're all going to enhance the brain. We're going to enhance the brain-computer interface. We're going to get better and better at that. So behaviorally, you can be like a genius. What happens when you have a world self-actualizing genius capability? That's a unique cultural change that we have to have the artists, the writers, the science fiction people, we've got to think it through. How can we move that transition as much as possible? Because right now the social contract says, you go to school, you do well, you get a job, you behave yourself, and you retire. That's not likely to be the model for the majority of the world in the future. So if we're going to have a new social contract, then maybe as the cost of living is still going up now, but as it starts to bell curve and comes down, that means what you have to pay for guaranteed income by 2030, 2040, or 2050 might be less than you have today. Transportation could essentially become almost free. Education could become free now, but we don't have agreements. A lot of the medical diagnosis will be free. I mean, so you just think about all those NTs that I was talking about. That will bring down the cost of living, what you have to pay people. Secondly, another curve starts to go up. You can license and tax robots, synthetic biology, new life forms, et cetera, et cetera. All these things can be an income stream to government. So this curve starts to go up, this other curve starts to go down. Where it crosses over, I want to see a cash flow projection to show that guaranteed annual income can work. We think around 2030 or so. And if that's the case, then you're not thrown out in the street. Because if you behaved yourself, did well in school, you're good in a job, it's not fair for society to throw you in the streets. It's just not the kind of world we want. But we got to be financially responsible about that. And that's what scenario 3 gets into. And education and cultural change for that thing is extremely important. So it would be nice if you tell teachers, I'd love to have teachers read scenario 3. Scenario 2 will depress them, they might commit suicide. But scenario 3, to start to say, okay, if that's a possible future, what do I do in my classroom? Also, ask your teacher friends to Google 2 words together. Increasing intelligence. Enter. And you'll start to see we know an awful lot about how to increase intelligence that we're just not applying at all. Teachers should know this stuff because they're teaching a brain, they're not teaching your stomach. Well, the pisco sours are pretty good. I use a little flexibility on that one. But in any case, you're mostly teaching a brain. Okay. Okay.
I think we have time for
Okay.
one more question.
Okay.
Santos, ¿no? ¿Alguna otra pregunta? La mano que está en la puerta, alto. ¿Puedes pararte, por favor, para ponerte de pie? Exacto, ahora sí se te ve. Muy bien. La última pregunta para poder continuar con nuestro programa.
Jerome,
Doctor, no, es okay.
sí, yo
One more question.
yo quería consultar. Vemos que definitivamente la inteligencia artificial, el Big Data y la computación cuántica es una realidad ya y va a ser parte de nuestro mundo. ¿Qué necesitamos hacer específicamente nosotros, los profesionales, los jóvenes? ¿Qué herramientas, qué software, qué necesitamos aprender para ir a esta ola, para montarnos a esta ola?
Right. Well, first of all, I thought I said we don't know if we can get to artificial general intelligence. We would be dumb if we didn't think we could. So if I'm in a bar, I'll take a bet. Yes, we'll do it. Am I 100% confident? No, I am not. Will we be able to do quantum computing? I can't guarantee that either. But the trend is moving directly for both of them in that direction. So it's reasonable to assume it's possible, but it's not a guarantee. So when you say it's a fact, it's not a fact. Fact means a past. We haven't gotten to the future yet. We're still working on the future. But what do you do to prepare? Almost all the things I was talking about. One is I would have people read the scenarios, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, read them because it engages your thinking. There's very detailed stuff in there. One is I'd have people read those things and think. Secondly, as I was mentioned before, is start to figure out how your hobbies and your side curiosities and so forth can hook up with people. Develop your own networks, not just the Facebook stuff, but I mean your own personal networks and in certain ways so that you end up connected to the whole world, but only a small fraction of it around the world, right? You don't need much, right? So that's one of the things that I would recommend people do now. Again, go back to the idea. You are the center of a world market, 50% of humanity. As you move a little further, it'll be almost all of humanity. I would go back to what I just said before, is Google's increasing intelligence. I would also have people experiment with collective intelligence systems. I won't mention names, but we spoke to some authorities here who may decide to create one for the country. If so, then we can talk about the country's individual intelligence and collective intelligence together. So those are some things that I would suggest you do now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Glenn. Thank you very much. Please, I would like to call our president, Dr. Glenn, please. Doctor. I would like to call our president, Mr. Rafael. Okay. Thank you very much to be here. Muy bien.
Green promotion.